I've got my own view on it. It's a disgrace in England. He was saying things which were not nice. That's why I went and did what I did. And he literally tapped him up. Don't allow it to get under your skin. You know it's not true. That's it. Now, if it's true, then you have a problem.
Hello and welcome to the Unsung Sport Podcast, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the sports you love. Today I am joined by Kenneth Asquez, an international football agent with over 20 years experience working across the Premier League, La Liga and beyond. Kenneth, thank you very much for joining us today.
Good evening, Mark. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. Look, I was really keen to get you on because I know that football agents get a lot of bad press. I think the role is grossly misunderstood. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree in the sense that unfortunately the media tend to demonize the industry. The moment they mention a football agent and they put the figures outside there, and a substantial element of it is totally unwarranted and uncalled for. There are examples of bad practices in the industry, but just the same as you find bad practices in banking, in law, in teaching, in every industry in life. Unfortunately, bad practices occur everywhere. The football industry has been a bit unregulated for a time. FIFA decided to deregulate it in 2015, so you saw a bit of an increase in these bad practices. But now, hopefully, with the new regulations, which are in certain countries, they're on standby to be implemented because of legal challenges based on certain elements of the new regulation. But I think eventually we'll get there, and I welcome the regulation from FIFA, them taking ownership again.
So can you talk me through like a typical day of a life as a football agent? What does that look like?
Well, it's quite a hell of a difference from when I was in banking, for sure. I mean, that 9 to 5 goes out of the window. You're literally 24/7. Some clients, you act like a family office looking after. I mean, I can give you examples. I've received calls from the wife of a player at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday telling me that the garage door doesn't open. And you're there. I mean, she's 2,000 kilometers away from you. So what do they expect you to do? You've got to be very careful with your reply because you've got to think of your client. So I remember this example where I told that, look, have you changing the batteries to remote control? Because that's human nature. That's the first thing you do. Obviously she had a few drinks because it was nearly 4 o'clock in the morning by this time, and she replied, "Are you calling me stupid?" I said, "No, I'm not calling you stupid. It's what I would do when a remote control doesn't work, be it TV, be it for the garage." Eventually I had to get somebody over who was close by, and so you've got the personal side, then you've got the father figure side when a player's down, when he's injured, when they've got marital problems. So there's lots of support with managers also when they've gone on a chain of about 3-4 defeats, and in the media they start speculating that he's going to be next to be sacked. So there's a lot of mental support which you have to do at difficult times during the day. It's an industry, of course, it's got its beautiful parts, but you end up being more a coach, mental than a professional in other ways, because of the amount of support that you tend to have to give to club owners, managers, players, and especially moving from one country to the other, where languages, it's key. I mean, I ended up building a bridge between Spain and Gibraltar for what we discussed earlier. Gibraltarians were British, but every single Gibraltarian is bilingual. So we understand the culture in Spain and in the UK, because we've been educated in the UK to British standard, GCSEs, A-levels, and university degrees. And in Spain, we live with them, they're neighbors. We know how they are thinking. So that's allowed me in certain transactions to come in and unlock a possible deal that is there, which is about to fall through. And that's been my USB that I bring to the table. Communication is key. And that's allowed me also to give advice to players when they've gone to the UK. There's this, you remember Joaquin, who just retired this year from Betis. I mean, in his day, he was the golden boy of Spanish football. He was branded after the Korea World Cup, the David Beckham of Spanish football. Played out in the wing, blonde, blue eyes. And in an interview, they asked him how come he never really hit the heights in terms of club football, because he went from Betis to Valencia to Fiorentina, Malaga, then back to Betis. His talent was more akin of playing for Barcelona, Real Madrid, top four Premier League, and Arsenal, and Liverpool, and Man City, Man United, and Chelsea. And he actually explained that he was unfortunate that in Spain he had a very tough president who wouldn't allow him to move to his rivals. But that Mourinho and Abramovich 3 times came in that year to Sevilla, sat down with him and wanted to sign him, especially as Chelsea had played Betis in the Champions League. So this would have been 2005, 2006. And the host told him, Joaquin, Chelsea, Mourinho, Abramovich, they were winning everything. London, one of the best capitals in the world. And the guy, he's from southern Spain, so I understand him perfectly. He said, yes, and where do you want me to go? To sleep at 3 o'clock in the evening in the winter, because it's dark. I mean, I'm from the south of Spain. I live with the sun in my back. I just couldn't do it. So you have to explain that culture when perhaps, and not all my respect, but if, say, for example, Burnley come calling for a player from Sevilla, it's quite hard for the player to move just for, and some English clubs have the mentality that, oh, they'll come to us. But no, there's a lot of clubs in La Liga who have got, the last 2 years, the standards have fallen quite a lot because of the economic consequences as a result of the pandemic, right? And also a bit the Ukrainian war. So the economy has suffered, no? But before, English clubs used to throw the money out, and there were a lot of players who would resist it because it's not just about money. I mean, I remember one specific case where Aston Villa asked for help for a player from Sevilla who was Argentinian. We're not going to mention his name because he never moved, but I sat down with them and I explained, literally, I said, listen, he's earning 1.8 million euros net. He's in Seville, add another 200,000 euros net. Sevilla playing in the Champions League, that's another 200,000 euros net. The son, he's got 6 Argentinian colleagues between Sevilla and Betis, that's another 300 euros net. If you're prepared to start, minimum 2.5 million euros net, so that he starts to think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's different. Villa, they've got Emery, they've got Monchi, they're challenging up there. Probably he would go now without second thoughts. But 3 years ago, 4 years ago, it's not that easy. And there's a lot of things that you have to bring to the table. A lot of people think it's just like playing Football Manager. It's not. I mean, I've started work already for transfers, not for January, because January is like a lottery. Clubs are reactive. Depends on the injury. They want to improve their position in the table. They want to challenge further up to consolidate into the Champions League places. They might have a key injury, like for example Spurs. They've lost Maddison and the central defender for several months, so they might look into the market. But in general, it's very reactive market. I don't normally invest a lot of energy into it. I'm there and support if they come. But we've already started for the summer, so we'll have to go out, meet the players, meet the families, see what the mental state is, their injury record. Do they like to go out? Do they like to stay home with the family? Because clubs are investing quite a lot of money into the whole project. So you've got to make sure that it's all seamless, because then clubs, they've got a big debt packed on the balance sheet and a commitment to pay over the next 4 or 5 years. And in the case of Chelsea, they've been doing contracts for 8 years. So imagine the amount of due diligence they will have to do.
Yeah, I was speaking. I think I heard an interview today actually with a Luton Town manager, and we also had the assistant director of sporting director at West Ham on, and they were both saying January for them, plus with the financial fair play impact just generally in the market, makes people a bit more nervous to go out. And so I think January this year will be quite quiet.
I agree, I 100% agree with them both. I think it's going to be very quiet, especially with the second point you mentioned is more important, the financial fair play. Clubs are taking it stricter. If you look at Spain, I mean, everybody is raving about Bellingham. I think he's a fantastic player. I think he's going to mark an era for English football. There's no doubt about that. But he is more in the headlines every year because the quality of La Liga has fallen dramatically. You don't have a Xavi Alonso, you don't have a Xavi, you don't have an Iniesta, you don't have a Sergio Ramos in his prime. So the quality has come down. I mean, no disrespect to Girona, but Girona are leading the table.
Yeah, mad.
Says a lot. Barcelona, they lost Busquets, they replaced him with Oriol Romeo. You have to read between the lines. The quality has come down. That's for sure. And it's to do a lot with the financial fair play. I mean, clubs don't want it, but you have to live within your means. It's crucial. It's like anything. I mean, you and me would like to live in a better property, but if we can afford a 200 grand mortgage, we're not going to go to the bank to ask for 1 million mortgage.
Yeah.
If then you're going to struggle. That's the example I give out always to people when they're looking for players. And January especially, most clubs are going to look for a 9. And I've got a couple of championship clubs. Oh, see if in England you can get championship equivalent in Spain. See if in England you can find a striker there. Yeah. You want a striker who scores 20 goals on a loan without a charge, and they pay 70% of the wages. Come on, let's be serious. You have to be practical too. And you have to live within your means.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I support West Ham United, so if you can find us at number 9, I'll be happy because we're struggling up top.
I tell you something. I've got a lot of admiration for the club. I think you have a fantastic owner, even though he gets a lot of stick in the media. I mean, I've worked with them for the last 10 years. My first big deal to the UK was Adrian, the keeper, in 2013 on a free transfer. I think he gets a lot of unfair publicity. He works his socks off for the club. And you look at the squad they have now compared to one of the first games I went. I think it was West Ham Hull City. West Ham won, and they booed the team off the pitch. And they won 1-0. It was a midweek game. And you need to be special to take Michael Antonio out of that starting 11. You might not like him as a player. He's not particularly the type of player that I like, but hats off to the man. There he is. 10 years after, you need to be special. How many strikers have come? Sebastian Haller, Shamaka, Inns, and he still starts playing.
Yeah, he's a grafter. I mean, he is a grafter. I can't, we can't knock him for that. But I don't know how old he is now. But we need someone back.
No, I know. But I mean, you need to be something special to take his place. I agree. They need to replace him because what he's done on his body is about 33, 34 now. But you need to be a special player to take his position on the field. I mean, it's not for want of not trying, but I think West Ham have probably spent, at least in David Sullivan's 10 years owner, easily £200 million, and he still starts.
Yeah.
There was a time where, what was his name, who came from Stoke City, who was still playing actually in Inter Milan, the Austrian.
Oh, Arnautovic?
Arnautovic. There was a time he started, but then when he left, they shifted Michael Antonio to striker, and And since then, look at him.
The rest
I
is
mean, I've
history.
spoken to some central defenders and they tell me he's a bloody nightmare to play against. They hate it.
Yeah, he's a bully.
He's a handful.
Yeah, he is a handful. He doesn't know what he's doing himself, which makes him hard to predict, which is not a bad thing, I guess.
No, I totally agree. Like I said, it's not my cup of tea. And sometimes with David Sullivan, we have these chats post-match. I know you don't like him. I said, well, let's put things into context. It's not that I don't like him. It's not that and I think every fan, I don't tell him because I don't want to put him on the spot, but every fan will like to have a Karim Benzema in your team or a Haaland. I mean, he's more like a juggernaut type of striker. But I take my hat off to how he's improved. I mean, he was signed as a right back / right winger from Forest. And to see what he's turned and grafted and fought, fair play to the boy. Pure admiration.
I mean, I've always loved him. He's still a record player. So anyway, enough about an Antonio.
It's difficult to find a name, especially in January.
Definitely
to replace him.
What makes a good football agent?
Good question. I mean, you definitely need to have people skills. If you're not a people guy, you're not going to succeed. Because there are times where you've got to put your arm around his shoulder and bring him up because he's had perhaps a career-ending injury. There are times when you need to give him a rollicking and say, listen, that's wrong because you went out and your team got hammered today 6-0. So you need to have personal skills. You need to have confidence in yourself in standing up to the individual and telling him when he's wrong. That's a common error. Unfortunately, agents will not adhere to that, and they'll, for fear of losing him as a client, they'll say everything is like a bed of roses when things are not. I mean, I've never lied or been disingenuous to a player. If I've told him he's asked me how was my game, I said, well, actually you were quite poor. It helps to know the game and understand it, but I'd say the key attribute has to be the people skills. Because you've got to talk and be in the company of people in different roles like technical director, scouts, owner, and different people require different types of conversations and different levels. And above all, you've got to respect everyone for what they are. And if you don't have respect, then again, you're in trouble. I mean, it's a tough industry as it is. It was 20 years ago. It's got even harder. Where there's big companies offering financial rewards and paying off families to take players on board and take them. It's got tougher. So if your reputation is key. And if you don't have a good reputation, then you're going to struggle bringing players on board.
Yeah, one of my questions actually was going to be around obviously we know there's the big agencies, the Stellas and various others, but do you work independently or are you part of an agency?
I work independently. I've got my own company. I started 20 years ago. I've got a staff of 3 in Portugal and Spain who support me. But we collaborate with some of the big agencies because in some countries they don't have the necessary support, or in some clubs they're not as strong as each other. That's something I don't understand. You find here, for example, in Spain, the likes of Stella more coordinated, but Wasserman appeared in Spain all of a sudden 3 or 4 years ago, and they started buying up different agencies, and they're all competing for the same products. They don't have a strategy or coordination. But we collaborate with anyone. I mean, it would be stupid not to go alone. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
You can't have. I mean, I don't have relationship with 50 or 60 clubs. I'll have excellent relationship with 15 between Spain, Portugal, and the UK. In other countries, I've got people who I've known over the years, and I trust them. and we depend on each other, and we work. We've got an off the record agreement, because trust is another very important issue in this industry. It's a very, very small world and tight community, and you live off your reputation. If you don't trust people, then, well, there must be a reason why you don't trust them, but if you trust them, then they're there for life.
And so is it a case that you didn't even think of that? But so you as an agent, if you had a striker on your books, but you didn't have the contact with a particular club, you would then partner up with another agency and say, look, or do you have anyone?
If I see that's the best thing for the client, yes, absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, there's some products now. You've seen them, like Transfer Room, for example. We're trying to do like an intermediary, and I call it, for me, it's basically a Tinder of football.
Yeah.
And they're trying to partner up where clubs can put players they want to get rid of. I think it's a bit dangerous, and agents who've got players who they want to place. For me, I'm not still convinced that's the right way forward, because at the end of the day, you're talking about human beings. I mean, for example, if I had a client at a club and I found out through an application or this website that the club no longer want him and they've put him there in the market, that for me, I think it's like a blow below the belt. I mean, the first thing you would have to do is sit down with the player. Look, it doesn't work for you. Bring his respective agent or whatever in, have a conversation, and then move on from there. It's life. It's not a problem. But putting it all on a website there and people access, at the end of the day, like I said, we're talking about people who've got their lives, they've got mortgages, they've got children in schools.
Yeah.
You imagine that a player moves on, a club changes the manager, and then tells him in November, I don't want you. He's French, playing for, I don't know, West Ham. They need to shift him. He ends up probably going to Burnley. Maybe he cannot take his family because he doesn't want to uproot his kids. People from the outside, they paid very well, yes, absolutely, but they're also human beings.
Yeah.
And that has to be understood and respected, because children so young to be moved from one school to the other and to another country and all the rest, it's quite difficult. I mean, Slaven Bilic is one of my clients. Last year he got the Watford job at the end of September. His 3 young daughters had started school in Zagreb already in August, so he decided to come on his own because he wasn't going to uproot them, especially with a club of the instability of Watford. At the end, we were proved right. It only lasted till March. How can you uproot them and take them to England by the time they start and all the rest? It's a lot of variables that need to be taken into account. And like I said, we are human beings.
Yeah, and you said this earlier. It's not like Football Manager. I think when everybody thinks of a transfer, they just think of the player, and they don't think of actually it's somebody's life.
Absolutely. Like I said, somebody's life. They've got wives, children, fathers, mothers. I don't want to even begin to imagine what went through Luis Diaz's mind 6 weeks ago.
Yeah,
that must have been terrible. Other players who we known that they've gone in and tried to steal whilst they're away. And when you're in a foreign country, imagine, I don't know, Albert, using your team as an example, West Ham are playing away. West Ham now know because they've got an outstanding player K department. Let's say 10 years ago, they're playing away. The club was cemented because a club, the success is not just the 11 players and the manager. There's a whole team behind them.
Yeah.
And I know very well the player care department that took a massive change with Hugo Schechter when he came in. They look after every single need of the family because you might be playing away and all of a sudden, let's say Alvarez, who came in this summer, his wife calls him at 2 o'clock on a Friday night that his daughter's got a fever of 50 and she doesn't speak English. What do you do?
Yeah.
And that will affect his performance on the pitch the next day, 1,000,000% guaranteed. So there are these aspects, and then one really, really important point that Slaven raised to me that I was totally unaware was, I asked him, I said, what's your biggest challenge from being a manager? And he said, the media. And I said, what do you mean? People write this. No. When I was a player, I used to go to bed on a Saturday, wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, go down to the kiosk and get the newspaper, open it, and see the rating I got for the game before.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a 5, it conditioned my week. If I got a 5 or a 6, I was angry. I wasn't training at my utmost. If they gave me a 9, I was messy every single training. Nowadays, you go to this was at Upton Park, a small changing room. But nowadays, you go to the London Stadium, a huge training ground. You don't have the Sunday people or the Mail on Sunday.
Yeah.
You've got this Twitter. How many people and the players going, oh, look at what they're saying. I missed this goal. I shouldn't have missed it. I've done this. I've done that. And that is a huge part of management which we're sometimes not aware.
Yeah, it's interesting, and again, I speak to a lot of people, and they do say that the social media side now, it's all about clickbait. So it's just a lot of people have to write something, so they'll just write crap, and actually that does affect people. You are writing about people.
Last week here in Gibraltar locally, they did a viewpoint on local football about the association, and the host over the weekend, she went crazy sending me screenshots. Look what this has said. And I said, Ross, is it true? And she says, no, that's what matters. Don't allow it to get under your skin. You know it's not true. That's it. Now, if it's true, then you have a problem.
Yeah.
Because it's channeled the reaction, because deep down, but you know it's not true. And on top of it, it's anonymous and fake accounts that even gets... I've got a rule. I mean, very rarely engage on conversations. Sometimes for banter, I'll get in and I throw it and leave and they'll stay there fighting. But I very rarely, on a professional basis, I don't get involved. Least of all with either a fake or anonymous account. I mean, I respect anonymous accounts, especially in a small place like Gibraltar, because people, they work in certain areas and can be quite vindictive, and they've got rules which they can be sacked or whatever, or disciplined. I've got respect for fake. I just don't have a single time in the day.
Yeah.
And internationally the same. I mean, sometimes it can get funny. I mean, one of my best things was Shearer liking one of my tweets. I mean, I'm a Liverpool fan on a personal basis, and he was going off his rocker when Liverpool played Newcastle and saying that Trent should have been sent off, which technically he was right. It was his second yellow, but he forgot just before the first yellow the way that he'd been fouled previously. So if you take that into account, it automatically eliminates the first yellow. He was right that there were 2 yellows and he got away with the second one. But if you're going to look at the whole global picture, don't be blind.
Yeah.
Look at everything. And that's unfortunately what's happening in football. People tend to be, I think in Sky they get a lot of criticism, but I think they've got a really, really good group now with Keane, with Neville, with Carragher, Micah Richards, that they bring in that great balance.
Yeah.
And they brought in, they've got quite I think personally they're doing an excellent job.
Yeah, I agree. I think Keane's as funny as Micah Richards, even though he doesn't mean to be.
Oh, one I love. I mean, like I said, I hated him as a player because I'm a Liverpool fan. But I mean, every morning I put the snippets. I mean, this morning I was watching one when he was going through the 13 red cards he received in his career, and he went, "Oh no, he deserved that one." And
Yeah, I've seen that one.
and it's really, really funny. You've got to understand that type of humor, and also, I mean, I understood when he mentioned something which I personally had never heard of it before. He mentioned the Highland incident, and he said that when he was lying down with his cruise ship and Aaron's dad was there lying, he was saying he was a gentleman in not saying what he said, but he said he was saying things which were not nice. That's why I went and did what I did. Which two wrongs don't make a right, but at least you've got to beat. I've played football to a decent level here and in Spain, and you've got sympathy. You've got sympathy for that. I mean, the program I told you about, they showed on TV on the association. They spoke about. They criticized heavily France for beating us 14, like we spoke earlier. I don't criticize France for taking the foot on the pedal. I would have criticized France for going 1 or 2-0 up and saying, "Okay, guys, game over. Forget it."
Yeah.
I think that is unprofessional. But taking your foot off the pedal, why is that unprofessional? That's what you're paid to do. Football is about winning, regardless of. You've got to use all the tools available. I remember my late uncle when he used to play, he said, "No, you tag his shots when you're in the corner, you tag." Okay, now it's a bit more difficult, no?
Yeah.
With VAR and so many phones to get away with things. But football is precisely that. I mean, 4 years ago or 5 years ago, the local team drew Celtic in the Champions League, right? And they beat them 1-0. And when the draw was made, I told the club, "Listen, by UEFA rules, you can play between 5, the kickoff can be between 5 and 8:45. You can choose it. You have to choose a 5 o'clock kickoff in July." They said, "No, we can't do that." I said, "Why not?" He said, "It's going to be too bloody hot." Precisely. That's what he wants. Imagine boys from Glasgow, 5 o'clock on temperatures of 45 degrees. I mean, eventually they went for a 7 o'clock kickoff, 7 p.m. and they won 1-0. For me, it's one of the greatest results we've ever seen in our stadium. But football is about using whatever advantage you have. You see it in professional football when Barcelona, Guardiola's tiki-taka team, they needed the ball to run quickly. They would sprinkle it 5 times before half-time, always. When Barcelona used to play away, they would leave the grass drier and uncut. What's the problem? It's not a problem. In Gibraltar, Mark, I can assure you, when we played against France, not a single yellow card. After the game, 6 of our players went running for Mbappé to get his shirt.
Yeah.
Why on earth would I want a shirt from the guy who's just beaten you 14-0?
Yeah.
Not in my book. Football is competitive, it's about winning, and that's it. Okay, there are certain rules and laws to abide with, but if you abide with them, you want to win. You don't care about winning. You as a West Ham fan, people say, "Oh, the Conference League, it's a Mickey Mouse trophy," and I was ecstatic that they won it.
Yeah.
They should have taken these competitions more seriously in the past, and they never did.
Yeah.
And the fans, you only had to see those celebrations were beautiful the following day in the East End. It was absolutely fantastic. It's what the clubs, that's what fans want, success. You don't care whether it's the Conference League, or, of course, everybody wants to league the Premier League and win the Champions League, but unfortunately, it's not open to everybody, more so nowadays. So it's about winning, and it's fans, you satisfy their thirst by winning and at least giving it a try. If you give it a try and challenging, that's what they want.
Yeah. You touched upon earlier as well around the getting any advantage you can, and it's harder now because of VAR and various things. VAR is an absolute shitstorm in England. Is it the same in Spain?
No, it's not. I mean, I'm fortunate. I'm bilingual. I support an English team. I work watching. But funny enough, Mark, what I fail to understand, I've got my own view on it. It's a disgrace in England. I 100% agree with you. It's a total, utter disgrace. I mean, I can understand why they take so long to take a decision. They mostly get them wrong. Um, I think it makes a big difference in Spain, Portugal, the rest of Europe. The VAR is at the stadium, not in Botchley Park or Brescia or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
I think that makes a bit of a difference. I think also in England, what I see from the outside is that the referees have become a bit complacent because they see, oh, well, if I miss it, I've got VAR who's going to pick it up. You don't see that in Spain. I mean, in Spain, there's been isolated incidents, but normally they handle a decision within a minute, two tops, the very tops. Also, again, but I think that's a fault of the Premier League. You know, with the offside rule, UEFA and FIFA had a program which was rolled out in the World Cup and worked perfectly. England decided against using it and using their own system. That's also affected a bit. And it's a question of getting a house in order. I fail to understand. The closest I can get to making a bit of sense is the fact that they're not in in direct comparison, because at the end of the day, VAR in England, Spain, and everywhere, it's the same. Why does it? You don't have the amount. I mean, I do regular radio contributions in Spain in respect of the UK, and when they complain about the VAR, I said, don't complain for that. Have a view at any, because and on top of it, before we used to say Man United used to get the rum of the mill because of Sir Alex.
Yeah.
They mess up every single bloody game. It's across the field. Nobody gets the run of the mill. They make mistakes for every single club. Everybody has their grievances. There's not a single one that has escaped this phenomenon. And I can only think of the only difference between Spain, Portugal, and the rest of Europe and England is the offside technology is different, and that the VAR there at the stadium, they arrive all eight as a team,
Right.
and the place there. I don't know if that mentally gives them, the referee at least, gives him a bit more personality and is more under pressure immediately to deliver because his colleagues are there.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing that makes sense to me. It's the only main difference.
Yeah. I mean, it baffles me because it was brought in to get rid of the
Improve the
uncertainty.
game.
Yeah, it's not. It's worse. It's definitely worse than it was.
In England for sure. I see games of the Premier League and Championship. That's my weekend, combining. But you can't. It's chalk and cheese. I mean, in Spain and in Portugal, they run like in the World Cup. I mean, we cannot honestly say that the World Cup was a bad World Cup because of VAR. No, it flowed perfectly, near perfection. It was very near perfection. Why cannot the best league, the best market? I mean, last week we signed the new, I don't know, I forgot how many zeros that contract had. And we can't get VAR. I'm sorry, we need to take a good look at ourselves and say, gents, why is this a mess?
Yeah.
It can't be. You can't have the best stadiums, the best training facilities, the best players, and have this absolute poor excuse, for want of a better word, of a system. Because, like you rightly said, it's made it worse. And football will always create debates and generate difference of opinions. But everybody, every week, I mean, the Liverpool Palace game, how
Yeah.
long did it take to decide?
5 minutes, wasn't it? Ridiculous.
5 minutes. Come on, it wasn't that difficult. Without VAR, I saw that Endo was pushed off the ball. I mean, West Ham has had some disgraceful decisions. Last year at Stamford Bridge, the goal that, come on, it's the livelihood. It makes a hell of a difference. I mean, I've already told a few friends. I mean, they say, no, Liverpool will win the league. No, Liverpool won't win the league. They'll be challenging there if they manage to steer clear of injuries to key players. Excuse me, they'll be there. I reckon the game against Spurs is going to come back to haunt them.
Yeah.
1,000,000%. And on top of it, look, they made a mistake. Put your hand up. I don't think it's fair to throw the referee or the VAR team under the bus the way they did by making public the recording. That for me was an absolute disgrace. I think the sport deserves better. The decision to make that public is not correct. They should have put the hand up and said, yes, we made a mistake. I'm sorry. That's all you want. By publishing those recordings, you're making it worse because there's football, unfortunately. I mean, like I told you earlier, I was out in Argentina with FIFA on a course. Once you visited, you realize why that World Cup meant to them. I mean, it's the only thing they have. The amount of poverty. I've never seen so many people, and I've got Africa opposite. I've never seen so many people sleeping in the streets. The recession, inflation. I mean, it worked positively for me because I've never stayed in a 5-star hotel cheaper in my life. I've never had such a small budget to have to pay for some of the meals. But there you understand why that it's their life. It's a religion. Messi is God.
Yeah.
There, Maradona is still God there. You walk by a La Bombonera where Boca play. Immediately you feel it, you sense it, and it looks as if the Premier League they don't care. They say we're the Premier League and this is what there is. Like I said, I was totally against those recordings being made public. I don't know what they wanted to achieve at the end by doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, in terms of your role and your interaction with clubs, who's the person that you most interact with? Obviously, you look after the player, but do you liaise a lot with the directors, the sporting directors, scouts? What's your interaction?
Depends with clubs. Mostly, I would do the technical director, a couple of clubs with the owners / presidents. Those would be my point of contact. Scouts, not so much because although they have a very important role, but in the decision-making process, their input is quite low in the food chain. And unfortunately, in this industry, you need to be practical. So you would speak to them at games for an opinion, gather information. What do you think you'll be looking for towards next season? Anything that I can help you with, and you would start off there. But as the time moves on, you would have to go higher up the food chain.
Yeah.
I mean, in England, there's been a shift. I mean, over the last 2 decades, I remember when I used to mention 20 years ago, you sat down with the likes of Glenn Hoddle or Sam Allardyce or Gary Megson and you mentioned a technical director, they would go crazy. It's as if you mentioned the devil and said, no, listen, we have this in Spain and Portugal. They're there to help the manager, to make your job easier. Unfortunately, they've seen the benefit of it in England, where now every single club has one. But 20, even 10 years ago, they thought you were talking about the devil himself.
Yeah.
The technical director is there to make the job easier. And with the turnover that some of these clubs nowadays move, you have to have a structured approach to everything. It's impossible for a manager to be like Alex Ferguson 20 years ago, Arsene Wenger. I mean, I know Unai Emery personally. I tried to take him to West Ham twice, and we failed.
Who was that? Sorry.
Unai Emery from Aston Villa.
Oh, yeah, that would have been good. I'd have taken him all day long.
Twice. He's got that type of structure at Villa. I mean, although Monchi is a technical director, but he comes below Unai, not above. Whereas in all other clubs, you've got the manager. I mean, you can say Shiki and Guardiola are on the same page in the organogram, not one above the other. But there it's more like a group of friends who actually have ended up working together. That's why City works so well. Plus, obviously, the unlimited amount of finances that they have.
Yeah, that helps, doesn't it, as well? But yeah.
It helps, but listen, I know Shiki Bailey Simon very well, and it's not easy also to do what he does. And
Yeah.
for me, he's in the top 3 of sporting directors in the world, without a shadow of a doubt. And you don't do that just with money. You can have all the money in the world, but you still need to get the right profile. You still need to get it right.
How difficult is a transfer negotiation process?
It's very, very difficult. I mean, this summer with your club, West Ham, there was a very good number 9 that we had a deal set up, but it was conversant of or dependent on Paqueta moving to City, because the finances would have broken the financial fair play. Unfortunately, this incident that cropped up, this investigation, the plug was pulled on the Paqueta deal, so the incoming striker couldn't come in. And you've got to pick up the pieces, you've got to lift the family, the player, everybody all around. So it's not that easy. I mean, it's not over. This famous English saying, no, it's not over till the fat lady sings, literally. It's not over until everything is signed. I remember one of my players, I was moving on loan from Benfica to Trabzonspor in Turkey, and they literally came on the last day of the window, literally the first in the 1st of September. And I said, it's just not possible. So we started working on it. There was a cut-off time of 6 o'clock. We were nearly there at 4 o'clock, and then the Turkish team said he needs to sign physically in Turkey. And I said, what do you mean? It's 4 o'clock. We're in Lisbon. That's impossible. Surely there must be another way. And I said, you said Turkey. Well, the Turkish embassy is Turkish land in Lisbon. And they said, yeah, that works. That fits in. The lawyer said it fits in. So we ran there, 5 o'clock, embassy closed. Ring on the doorbell, nothing. I literally put the player again. I remembered where in Italy they'd thrown a contract over the wall, and it was in the office, so physically they had to accept it, even though it was 5 to 6 and they shut the door. I put the player against the wall, I jumped over him, and jumped over the embassy, and I started calling out until eventually a security guard with a gun, thankfully he wasn't pointing it at me, but he came, I explained the situation, he signed it with about 10 minutes to go. The tension, imagine in those days I used to smoke. Mark, I used to go through a packet an hour. Unbelievable. Then you get managers who are looking for a certain profile, and they come up with an excuse saying, like, I don't like the hair of that particular player. And you're sitting there, and the hair, what's the hair got to do with? I mean, I know and this player is now playing for bloody Chelsea, Cucurella, and there was a Premier League manager who didn't like his hair. I said, look, come on, I can understand that if you want to play a 4-4-2 and you don't like your fullbacks to push forward, fair enough. But I don't think it's right to use that excuse. That's difficult to take on. I prefer them to be sincere and say, look, I just don't fancy him. That's not a problem. It's understandable. Football is about opinions.
And what did you say in that situation?
No, I had to tell him the truth. No, but what do I tell him? Mark, what do I lie to him? What, they don't have money? They end up signing another player. You cannot. One thing I've learned in my life is, even though the truth is hurtful, just tell him the truth. It's the best way, because it's a small world and it'll come back to haunt you. And since then, I've heard this same manager has done it to another 4 players. He obviously doesn't like the hair. I don't know. Must have a fetish or something about long hair.
Can you ever change a manager's opinion?
No, you can't. You have to work with it and you have to deal with it. But I found that with players and managers and clients, some owners don't like saying the truth. It angers. I mean, I've put players like Kante to West Ham, and I've been told, "Oh, he's too short." And I've looked at the guy who was at the time the chief scout there, and I said, "Too short." But Messi, Iniesta, and Xavi, they're the same size. Are you telling me you wouldn't sign them for West Ham? What you've got to do is what he does with his body and what he does on the pitch. That's also a big problem in football. I mean, what you mentioned at the beginning in the introduction, that the reputation of some agents. But I had this conversation once at the sports law conference. This lawyer from this club, who shall remain nameless, was really going and saying, "Oh, they're a disgrace. They literally they screw us for every single penny." And when we finished, I put my hand up. I said, "Listen, you've got a solution for this." He says, "What's that?" I said, "When they ask you for more money, say no. No, we can't do that." I said, "Why not?" Because then the player goes to another club. Then you are giving the agent the tools. It's quite simple. But then they don't want to, because they will lose out on the player. So who's the bad guy?
Wasn't there a fee cap proposed recently?
Well, it's it that no. There is a cap. I mean, I've done a lot of work with FIFA, and we've had this conversation. That's why I said it hasn't been approved. It's been legally challenged in Germany, Spain, and the UK. The three have not accepted the new regulations, predominantly based on the cap. Now, I had this conversation with friends, I call them friends at FIFA, and I said, "How did you decide to arrive on the capping system?" And I gave them the example. I said, "Listen, if I put my property up for sale, I go to an estate agent. I don't go on my own. That's why clubs go to intermediaries and agents. And if I want £1 million and I agree at 5%, and if that agent brings me 1.2 and I decide to give him 7.5%, why should FIFA stop me?" And this is exactly what they're doing with the capping. I mean, they have used the American model, they've told me, the NBA, on the capping. So basically, I told them, I said, "Listen, how can you use the American model for capping when NBA, the contracts are worth on average $10 million and there's 50 agents? And in football, the average is 1 million and there's 50,000 agents. You can't compare." I mean, I understand you need to regulate it. I'm not saying I'm not against it, but the capping needs more work to be done, and especially now that they 2 weeks ago in the UK, it was challenged, and there's a judgment. The full judgment is not out there yet to see the actual legal basis that they've used. But the capping was one of the key issues. Spain the same. Germany was the first one, but not a lot of people paid the attention to Germany. But now that the two biggest leagues in the world have actually challenged it and accepted it, now they're paying attention. So FIFA's gone back to the drawing board.
As an agent, do you use the media to create hype around a player?
No, none, zero. I can show you every single deal I've done over the past 20 years, and you can review or do audit the media, and you will never see anything on it. I do work a lot with the media, and I try to help them a lot. But in terms of players or whatever, it's always post the transfer. I don't agree with media. I mean, in a way, for me, it's like prostituting a player out there. I've got certain values as an individual, and I keep it there. And it angers me when stories come out in respect of some of my clients, because it's just not true. One of the examples last year this year, no, last year, because it was in September, with Slavan the Athletic wrote an article even before he'd arrived in London, and even before he'd flown into London. They wrote an article that he had turned down the opportunity to manage Watford in June, and had met the owner in Spain, and he had and why accept it now? So it was already creating a very bad position for him. And I tracked down the journalist and said, listen, with all due respect, that story is a crock of shit. Literally, I used those words. And he said, well, I trust my source. I said, well, your source is lying. Simple. That's simply not true. He was in Spain with me, not in June. He was in April at the invitation of his footballing son, Luka Modric. We were in Madrid because in 2 days we saw Real Madrid, Chelsea, and Atletico Madrid, Man City. Yeah, but you putting a story there, that's not good of you. A journalist should do their homework, and that story which you've printed is an absolute crock of shit. And when I flew over to England, I made sure I told him in his face too. And he changed, but he didn't retract it. I was disappointed because I've helped him a lot, but he didn't retract the story, which I know why it happened, and I told him also. I said, I know who your source is. I know you're not going to tell me who your source is, but I know all about it. So if you sleep at peace, I sleep at peace knowing that did not happen. Like I told you about the Gibraltar journalists with the program this Twitter. I know that did not happen. So does Slavan, and so does Gino Pozo. That is what matters, not the wrong headline you pulled there.
Well, that comes back to the trust you mentioned earlier.
100%. I have 6 journalists who I trust with my life. We talk about anything in the UK, in Spain, and Portugal, and they're trustworthy and they're good people. And again, people in the media, like agents, get demonized. But if you stick to trusting and to good stories and all the rest, you've got nothing to worry about. I don't agree. I mean, this phenomenon that is called Fabrizio Romano. I mean, I take my hat off to what the guy has done. But a lot of the content is copy-pasted from and stolen from other people. Very rarely does he accredit them. But the guy, look, fair shot on him. He's created a phenomenon now that kids don't believe a transfer has happened until he bloody posts it. I've spoken to friends. This summer I did when Slaven went to Saudi. No, he's gone to Saudi. No, it's not happening. What do you mean? No, Fabrizio Romano hasn't tweeted it. Listen, I've just come back from Austria for signing everything off. What do you mean? No, but he hasn't. Oh, it's unbelievable. And he puts a lot of content which I'm certain agents have paid to put the interest, because now he's got such a big following that he can influence a transfer. But I'm totally against. I've got certain principles as a human being, which a certain barrier I was taught with that, and I won't surpass it.
Do you have a lot of players reaching out to you?
I reach out more than I know the clubs in England, certain profiles that they're looking for. So we're out in the field most days in games, and once we identify a certain profile, then we'll reach out not to the player directly, but we'll use local information to see who the agent or the lawyer or the person responsible is. will reach out to them and we'll start working on it. I do receive quite a lot. I respond to everybody who, as you know, who reaches out to me via LinkedIn, via Instagram, or whatever. And 95% of the times, players, I've got to unfortunately explain to them that the levels that I'm working, they won't fit in, for want of a better word. I'm not going to tell him you're crap and I can't. I'm a father of two lovely children, and again, it's about respect. Mark, it's about respect. I respond to every single one of them, and eventually, some of them thank me, some of them don't like it, but if you deal with them with respect, I think it would be worse if you don't respond to them.
Yeah, I guess you just have to be as honest as you can be.
No, there's about 30, 40 messages a day. I'm talking about it's not one or two. And I take my time. I divide my day. I'm not on the phone all the time. I divide it, and maybe I won't do them every day. But then perhaps tomorrow I've got to travel to Saudi. The flight's at 5 o'clock, so I'll get up in the morning at 8. I'll go for my walk. Then I'll come back, and then I'll spend an hour clearing up messages and replying to them. And nowadays it's quite difficult that a good one will skip.
As an independent agent, how many clients do you look after?
The maximum I had at one time has been 3 managers and 8 players. But I've got a team who've been with me for practically most of the journey, so we spread the load and we're trustworthy. We've changed a lot our structure because we cannot support more than that. And we do more intermediary work than looking after the day-to-day players. Because to have a structure, to have a stable of 50 players, you need a hell of a lot of people. And then the good ones, there will come the bigger agent who will always look for a weakness in that structure, and they will end up pricing them away.
Yeah, I suppose if you can't give them the attention they deserve, they're just going to look elsewhere.
Especially now with social media. I know colleagues of mine who they don't have any problem in sending a direct message by Instagram. Hey, I've got an offer from this place, but you need to sign with me. So how can you do that? I've never contacted the player by social media. Absolutely never. If it's of interest, I will find who their agent, lawyer, family member who looks after them and contact them directly.
I've heard stories of players on international duty trying to get their teammates to switch to other agents. Does that still happen?
I think it still happens a bit to a certain extent. When an agent has got a player in a certain club, he'll use that player to start the process of getting another one on board. I think that will never die. So when they're in the national team and their colleagues, because they spend a lot of time together, they're sharing a room, they'll call, they put him on the phone. I think it was Gary Lineker on his podcast with Shearer and Michael Richards, and he spoke about it was on England duty with Pillage. If you haven't heard it, listen to a clip. It's hilarious. And Brian Clough called him. Forest at the time, European champions, winning leagues, and he literally tapped him up because he was a player at I think he was at Everton at the time. And he went, "Oh, Mr. Lineker, we didn't know. No, thank you very much. You're not big enough to." He was about to move to Barcelona, and he literally rattled a few things because he called Forest not big enough. And Clough said something very educated and banter-wise and hung up the phone. I never heard from him again. But of course, he was going to bloody Barcelona. And it came out public not so far, not recently, and it's really, really good. But I think that happens, and it happened because Shilton was rooming with him, and Shilton put him on the phone.
Kenneth, it's been a great pleasure speaking to you. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you directly?
Well, my social media channels are all open. My website, smile.gi, you've got my private, well, not my private, my mobile number and my email address. They can just drop me a line. Bear with me, but I respond to everyone who gets in touch, for sure. I learned that from my banking days, and within a few days I will get back to them. So all my details are on my website, www.smile.gi. Or on any of my social media feeds, you can send me a private message, and I'll respond for sure.
Great. I'll put those details in the description. Thank you very much once again for being an unsung hero of sport.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.